I thought we would take a break from talking about the dynasties back to back to back and change up the pace a little bit. So every few videos I will do just that, and I will talk about a new topic regarding ancient Egypt. In this video, we will discuss the ancient Egyptian temple, which was a key aspect of their culture and religion. The ancient Egyptians considered temples as the homes of their gods. Each temple was dedicated to a particular god or goddess. Priests and even the pharaoh worshiped the god or goddess at the temple. The development of the temple, like many structures in ancient Egypt, underwent changes over the different epochs. And it seems the Egyptians had no problem dumping tons of money into their temples, which became more and more elaborate over the ages. There were two main types of temples in ancient Egypt. The first were cult temples that were dedicated to a particular god. The other type were mortuary temples, which were built to commemorate and perhaps even worship a deceased pharaoh. It is important to note that early on, temples were placed very close to the pharaoh's tomb. Later on, during the New Kingdom era, pharaohs placed their tombs a great distance away from the temples. The temple hit its zenith during the New Kingdom era, so that is the style we are going to talk about in this video. We will actually start from the outside of the temple and work our way in, and examine all the main parts of the Egyptian temple. Now, by the New Kingdom era, most temples were built entirely out of stone, and the basic layout was pretty much the same. All temples included a processional path, pylons, courtyards, halls, and inner chambers. Each temple was dedicated to a specific god or goddess, and we will discuss that in a bit. The first part to the temple was the processional path. The priests would have walked up the path towards the temple. The path sometimes contained sphinx statues which guarded the approach to the temple. During a festival, the entire procession made their way up this path. The path led up to the facade or pylon of the temple. It's important to note that the processional path was usually outside the temple itself and was associated with chaos. And it is chaos that constituted the outside world. Inside the temple represented a place of order. So order and chaos, always in conflict with each other in ancient Egypt. Now, as the priests approached the temple, they would have had to first walk through the pylon, which contained the main entrance to the entire temple structure. The pylon is easily the most distinctive feature in Egyptian temples. The pylon functioned as the facade for the temple. Each pylon is made up of two flat towers that were to the left and right of the main gateway. As you can see, the gateway is lower than the towers of the pylon. It seems this was all done on purpose, as the pylon is believed to have resembled the horizon. In fact, it looks very similar to the hieroglyph for horizon, which depicts two hills, and in between these two hills, the sun rose and set. So the two hills make up the towers of the pylon, and the sun is supposed to rise and set between the two towers, right above the gateway. Thus, the pylon is very closely associated with the sun. Also, each tower contained a stairway that led to the roof. It's important to note that usually only the priests and pharaoh were allowed to pass the pylon. The temple was closed off to the public, except for special occasions. Beyond the pylon are the peristyle courts. These are open rectangular courts that are surrounded by a colonnade. This was usually the place where the public could meet with the priests. The public was usually allowed into the court, but only during festivals. And even then, this would have been as far as the public were allowed to venture inside the temple. You can see in this picture that at the front of the court is the pylon, and you can also see the main gateway, which opens up into the courtyard. Beyond the courtyard are the Hypostyle Halls. These were very large covered rooms with columns. These columns provided support to the roof. The columns are usually organized in rows that are parallel to each other. The room was dark except for the center aisle, which was usually lit by windows that were cut into the roof. These halls were usually placed directly in front of the temple's inner chambers. So at the end of the hall would have been a door that led to the inner chambers and the secretive sanctuary. You can see this blue right here, and you might be able to make out some yellow stars. So these represented the night sky, and these usually were painted at the top of the roof. Beyond the great halls, as I said, were the temple's inner chambers. The main room contained the sanctuary of the temple's main god. This was the most important place in the temple, as this was considered the residence of the god or goddess. It was here that priests or even the pharaoh would give offerings and would perform a daily ceremony. The inner sanctuary usually was located near the back of the temple complex. Inside the sanctuary, there would have been a statue of the main god or goddess. This particular sanctuary is dedicated to the god Horus. Now, some temples contained statues of several gods, and these might have been stored in adjacent rooms. As I mentioned, the sanctuary was off limits to the public. Only priests and the pharaoh were allowed inside the sanctuary. There were also many other rooms surrounding the sanctuary. These were mostly storage rooms. So let's tie it all together in this photograph. You can see here is the processional path, here is a pylon, and then the open court, and yet another pylon and another open court, followed by the halls and inner chambers. I should point out that this is only a general order, but there were other designs as well, so some temples didn't necessarily follow this standard order. In the next video, we will continue on with the dynasties.